Get right to the site. Welcoming the host of the Late Kick, Josh Pate, and former ACC Player of the Year, Danny Kanell. Josh, what a scene there in Indianapolis. Your initial reaction to what you just saw there at Lucas Oil Stadium.
It's history. I mean, it can't be overstated enough. It's history. We're surrounded, Danny, not by just white and red confetti, but there's some black in here. That means the Georgia Bulldogs are the national champs. It's really interesting how this played out because you got such a tale of two halves. At one point, it looked like a field goal fest because it was, and we end up seeing some bombs back and forth. You get into kind of a haymaker situation in the second half. We talked so much about the inability for Georgia to run the ball in the first contest. And it's not that they lit up the stat sheet today. It was one big run. That James Cook one big run they ripped off seemed to symbolize sort of a momentum shift that Georgia really never gave up, even though they took some shots from Alabama. It's everything they couldn't do the first time around that they found a way to do this time around.
They stuck to their game plan. Defense got them to this position. Defense won this game. We talked a lot about the mental hurdles. That first half was ugly.
Yeah.
They looked like it, especially offensively. They had a bunch of penalties. They looked awful early. And it was almost felt like it was a position they hadn't been in, because remember they come out and had leads and then blown them. Well, they got other jitters out of the way in the first half, came out having played awful and only down 3 points at halftime. And they were like, all right, we can settle in. We're okay. We played awful and we're still right in this game. And then the defense showed up. Stetson Bennett makes one big play, which is exactly what they needed him to do. They didn't need him to throw for 400 yards. They just needed him to be a game manager, control the game, make the right decisions. He didn't have that catastrophic error. And it's history, like you said.
Guys, it boiled down to the fact, and Coach Saban put it quite concisely, that one team finished the football game, the other didn't. But leading up to this matchup, we sort of had that script flipped, in which Alabama was finishing football games and Georgia just couldn't get it to zeros with a lead on the scoreboard. Danny, why was that different here on Monday night?
I mean, let's be honest. Nick Saban, we saw smiles on his face. He looked very happy for Kirby Smart. This might, even though he didn't get a championship, this might have been his best coaching job that he's had. And I know you could say they didn't finish, but they also lost Jameson Williams for the entire game, for the second half. They didn't have John Mechie III in this game. Their offensive line was banged up. And I don't even want to bring that up because I don't want to take it away from Georgia. But this wasn't Nick Saban's best team. This was a team that he wasn't playing there. And then you saw the defense finish off this game with the pick six. That really sealed the fate of Alabama. And they did step up. And that is clutch. I mean, that's what you have to do to be the best. You got to beat the best, and you have to send that knockout punch. You can't just hit them with a glancing blow.
Right.
You got to go for the knockout punch, and they got it with the pick six.
You can't do both things. You can't criticize Georgia for never finishing and then discount it when they finally finish. Fact of the matter is, Jameson Williams, John Mechie, out. Injuries are a part of the game. No team gets to the finish line unscathed. The Georgia Bulldogs haven't either. But it was really interesting because I know revisionist history, Danny, maybe when you look back on this and you see, oh, that's a double-digit win for Georgia, people will tell their grandkids, you could really feel Georgia start to take over after halftime. No, there was a time where Alabama led this midway through the fourth quarter. And so it was take a shot, give a shot, take a shot, give a shot. You just got to be in that sort of ping-pong seesaw scenario. You got to be on the right end more times than not. 7 times in a row they haven't been, to varying degrees. And finding a way tonight, I don't think anyone's going to bed tonight. Well, I don't think anyone's going to bed, period. When they eventually do go to bed in Athens or in Indianapolis, I don't think they're going to lay their head down and say, well, Jameson Williams was out. They don't care. This is a national championship. Once upon a time, Nick Saban won a national title with Colt McCoy out in the Rose Bowl. I don't really think anyone cared about it that night either.
I want to take you back to the fourth quarter. Critical play. Stetson Bennett, the fourth, gets high pressure on him from Christian Harris. He fumbles the football, and Brian Branch just casually catches the ball, gets one toenail inside the line. What was that moment like there at the stadium? What was that like watching that unfold?
I was on the field, and I got to be honest with you, 2 things crossed my mind. Number 1, that's a forward pass. This is my eyeball speaking. And then number 2, even if it's not a forward pass, there's no way he stayed in bounds over there. And then you start looking up at the monitors, and you say, maybe that was a fumble. Still, there's no way he's in bounds. And then you see the zoomed-in shot, and you realize maybe he was in bounds. It was a play that I thought was called a certain way just for the sake of knowing they could go back and review it. And then it turns out when they go back and review it, not only did they make the right call, it felt so much like if you were writing your post game, you've got an Alabama national championship and you're pointing to that very moment. That's a situation like we're talking about where Georgia overcomes adversity like you always have to do in the fourth quarter of these games.
No doubt. It was absolutely the right call. In the moment, though, I thought we were going to have a Knoxville, remember Tennessee, Ole Miss?
Yeah.
There were some water balls being chucked from the stands. There were a lot of boos. But that was kind of the game that it was, is Georgia, we're talking about the knockout punch.
Right.
They kept getting a lot of punches their way. And, some of those are bad breaks. That was a moment that it felt like, this is going to be a turning point in the game. Guess what, though? Defense stepped up. Like it wasn't that devastating moment in the game where all of a sudden Georgia collapses. They didn't let it phase them. Were able to fight their way back in. And thankfully, because I don't want to have a game marred by a bad call where it's out there and it could be controversial. It was the right call. Officials got it right, and thankfully it didn't impact the outcome.
This was such a great game to watch, guys. Big boy football throughout the entirety of this one. And a lot of that physicality came through the screen. But Josh, when you tell us you were standing down there field level, give us a sense of that physicality up close and personal.
It's amazing when you watch specifically these two teams. It's amazing when you get to this level in the postseason, high-level bowl games, playoffs, national championship. It's not just a flash here and there, Danny. It's consistently high-level performing. That's what gets you on the field for a team like Alabama or Georgia. They've got so much depth. There's so many highly rated 4- and 5-star guys not on the field tonight. Because of the standard they demand for you to be on the field, it's so relentless. It's not come out and let the sugar high wear off and settle into the game. It is like that hair on fire 4 quarters, but also staying fundamentally sound. It's really incredible to watch because it's in pretty short supply nationally right now.
Yeah, the speed on the field was evident, and the closing speed. When you would see catches made and then a tackle made instantly.
Yeah.
And there was a lot. I think that was the credit to the defense having a little bit extra time to prepare for both sides. Neither quarterback really was comfortable all night in the pocket. They were both getting harassed, and you see the margins are slim. There was a couple plays. Guy Hall had a drop that Bryce Young delivered a perfectly thrown ball. Would have been about a 40-yard gain. Instead, he drops it. Like, it's that type of game where the momentum swings were so great. 1 or 2 different plays could have changed the outcome. But this was a defensive battle of NFL talent all over the field, speed, quickness, and physicality. And I think that's kind of one thing that's very fascinating to me, Josh, is in the overall chess match of college football. A few years ago, we saw teams throwing it all over the field, RPOs, spreading the field. We saw some physical football from both of these teams. And I think it's a reminder this game is still played in the trenches and won in the trenches as well.
Yeah, and the Georgia defense doing what it wasn't able to do in the SEC championship, which was to sack Bryce Young. They had 0 of them in the SEC title game. They get 3 of them in this game. But in terms of the quarterback that benefited from all of this was Stetson Bennett IV. And how about the story, Danny, for Stetson Bennett IV? He's a walk-on. In high school, he's wearing the UPS hat, so he gets noticed at showcases. Walks on at Georgia, comes back, walk on to national champ. I mean, how about this moment for this young man?
You can't say enough about the story. Just one of the most likable young men. You root for the underdog. His own fan base wanted him benched after the SEC championship game. That is hard to overcome. I've been booed at home. It's something to be, booed by the opponent. But when your own fans are ready to turn on you, that's when your confidence is challenged, your mental state is confident, and your belief in yourself is challenged. He didn't let any of it faze him. Stayed within himself. And I thought credit to Kirby Smart for not panicking and going to JT Daniels. Credit to Stetson Bennett for not trying to force the issue, for playing within himself, and for bringing this historic championship, first one in 41 years, back to Athens. I do not think Stetson Bennett will have to pay for any meals or any drinks for the rest of his life, and maybe in the state of Georgia, not just Athens.
Let's think about this for a second now. We watched, for instance, with the University of Oklahoma this year, we watched a former highly touted quarterback in Spencer Rattler get booed by his fans. Ultimately, he gets replaced by Caleb Williams. He transfers. And then you got a guy over here who had virtually no stars next to his name. And you got a guy on the sideline in JT Daniels with the aforementioned star rating to tout. There were so many calls, like you said, not only from the fan base during the season, Danny, leading up to the playoff. We're fielding them. You're looking in your DMs. I'm looking in my inbox constantly. It's, what about JT? At halftime tonight, it's what about JT? That's why I'm going to be as respectful as possible. A lot of people are celebrating in the stands, had to buy a ticket, and there's one guy over there being paid millions upon millions of dollars. They stuck with it. They stuck with it to the end. You could tell they were resolute in their decision making. They were never going to waver. They were going to go down, win or lose, with Stetson Bennett. But because they won this thing, you're talking about storybook upon storybook, chapter after chapter. And also what it does is it reminds the rest of the country. You know, we were talking about high-level defense being played. It also reminds the rest of the country there's still more than one way to skin the cat, even against Alabama, even in a championship setting.
DK, to your point, I'm told that the quick trip down Magnolia Lane is just on the other side of a Dogs national title. So maybe some good golf out in front of Stetson Bennett as well. It's a feel-good story made for movie, but who doesn't love a good villain as well in this defense for Georgia? It's made up of some bad dudes. Nakobe Dean flying sideline to sideline. And the way they pressured the passer in this game, far different from what they were able to accomplish in the SEC title game. Josh, where did you see differences in the way that they got to Bryce Young and the way they moved the pocket tonight, that front center for Georgia?
I think what they saw the first time, and probably what they saw if they watched Bryce Young against Auburn and they watched Bryce Young against LSU, is he's still a young quarterback, man. This is his first full year starting, and I think one of the self-scouts Alabama had, one of the scouting tendencies that Georgia had, was Bryce Young tends to drift towards pressure sometimes. You saw him do that a couple of times tonight. We never know what the difference in that is. It could be a sack versus Bryce Young otherwise would have thrown the ball 57 yards down the field for a touchdown, but the bottom line is Bama had chances. They were in plus territory several times. They outgained Georgia in this game. The difference ended up being red zone defense. And it felt like such a miracle when Cam Latu caught the one touchdown pass he did catch down near the goal line, because Georgia understood between the 20s, we're not shutting Bryce Young down. What we can do is we can leverage him as hard as we can, make him earn every bit of it. And then when they got him down in the red area, red zone, red area is what Nick Saban calls it, they were able to clamp down. It was really that, along with ripping off one big run and completing one big pass. Game like this, that ended up being the difference.
Dan Lanning deserves a ton of credit. The defensive game plan he had ready for him from the start, I thought they were more aggressive. They were willing to mix up coverages on the back end, some single high, and then, going a little umbrella look on the back end, bring in more blitzes. And it wasn't just the 3 sacks. And we talked in the pregame about making him uncomfortable. Bryce Young never really got comfortable in the pocket. You mentioned the red area, the red zone stops they had. A good example of where you don't have to get the sack, but you have to get the hurry. They had a little corner route to Holden in the slot. He's open, and Bryce Young has to throw it a little bit faster and a little bit more, like he was not comfortable, overthrows him by 6 inches.
Yep.
If he has time, that's a touchdown all day long. But those were the little type of impact plays in the game that make the difference in national championship and not.
Bryce Young threw multiple interceptions, 2 of them for the first time all season. He had never thrown more than 1 pick in a game, and he does it in the national championship game. As a result, Kirby Smart beats his former boss for the first time. Georgia beats Alabama for the first time since 2007. Their first national championship since 1980. Josh, you're from Georgia. Put it into perspective here. The Atlanta Braves won the World Series a few months ago, and now the Georgia Bulldogs are national champs.
Well, if you're not from Georgia, I'd recommend just a simple reroute. Maybe take 65 through Alabama for a little while. I don't think if you're not from there, here's a double negative sentence for you, I really don't think that you can put it into words. These are people, Danny, who were utterly convinced a Georgia sports curse exists. Convinced of it now. You couldn't tell them anything otherwise. And the Braves get it done, and then it shifted from, well, okay, but I've seen the Braves do it in my lifetime if I'm 35 or 40 years old. I've never seen Georgia do this. And then you had all up, and then it comes crashing back down in the SEC championship game against you-know-who. And I'm telling you, I went home for Christmas, and what Georgia fans would let on and let you believe publicly was far different from what they were talking about at the restaurants and at the gym. They were shell-shocked a little bit by that SEC championship. And to get back here and avenge it, as it turns out, against Alabama, it's so huge. And we were talking in the lead-up, Danny, about how at least I felt like this was a fork-in-the-road moment for them. Mark Richt got to this moment in 2012. They couldn't beat Alabama. Certainly probably would have gone on to win a national championship. They never got close again. Kirby finally got here. I thought this was a big fork-in-the-road moment. They get it done, and now you have no clue what kind of floodgate could open up. It's like the Roger Bannister sub-4-minute mile. You had to see that it could be done. Well, now that everyone sees it can be done at Georgia, who knows what kind of windfall they benefit from.
Yeah, you could see them winning a few here in the next 5-6 years. You could also see this matchup happen again, either in the SEC championship game or the national championship. I wouldn't be surprised if either of those scenarios happen. They already have the talent on the roster. We talked about the mental, just hangover. They could not get past this moment. Now that they've slayed this dragon, it does feel like all of a sudden that we have unleashed the dragon, so to speak. And I think this is going to be a monumental win for Kirby Smart. That first one's always the hardest.
Right.
And now it feels like the sky's the limit. It's only going to help in recruiting, a school that's already crushed it in recruiting. Watch out for the Dogs here coming up in the next decade.
The Dogs.
They said Kirby Smart was going to build Bama East. Bama East. Well, now it's starting to become just Georgia.
Yeah, there you go.
And it's Kirby Smart's Georgia, and watch out.
Dogs had their day. Danny, Josh, great stuff. And hey, real quick, a big thank you to both of you for all your hard work throughout the college football season. We're not who we are without you guys and your work week in and week out. So thank you again. And a great post game. We appreciate it here on CBS Sports HQ. Great stuff as always. Josh Pate, Danny Cannell here on CBS Sports HQ. Alabama was looking to become the first team in the college football playoff era to win back-to-back national titles. It does not happen. Instead, Georgia becomes the 5th school to win a natty in the 8 years of the CFP, joining Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, and LSU. Hey, and for more awesome content with Josh Pate, check out The Late Kick, delivering college football the way you want it. Of course, he will have plenty of reaction on The Late Kick. You can join Josh 3 times a week on YouTube, 8 Eastern Time. You can also listen to the podcast version as well. The Late Kick with Josh Pate.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.